All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead. Most of them should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, like a phone. If you're on a large screen, like a computer, it should be to the right of the video. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. So we got a question from Kevin M. It says, does the left shoulder go down and under or just round, please? So I'm not sure exactly what point in the swing that you're talking about, but basically when we start the downswing, right? So in the backswing, it's going to go down, right? If you're a right-handed golfer, it's going to go down as you rotate your shoulders. As you start your downswing, it's going to go down a little bit, right? So I'm here, it's going down from where its original position was, it's going down. Then as I move into my lead side, it's going to go down. Then it's going to go up and around. That's how the left shoulder is going to work in the swing. And as far as how it works, as far as the from this angle, right? So from this angle, goes down some more as we start a downswing, then up and around. Then from this angle, we want it to go down as well. We don't want it to go up and out, right? That's going to take us out of our posture. If we do that, we want it to go down, right? And then we want it to go up and around. Kevin goes on to say, did you miss the previous question? Let's see here. Oh, so you asked, yeah. Okay. So basically, Kevin, not sure if you're on here today, but basically the office hours, it is a little bit misleading because it says office hours. It should be office hour, I guess. But yeah, it's an hour. So yesterday, we started at 11 and we ended at noon Eastern time. It looks like you asked your question at 12:16, so it would have been after the office hours ended, so that's why it wasn't being answered. So hopefully Kevin gets the message there. But yeah. All right, so Kiedro says, I'm hitting my irons beautifully, but I cannot get the slice out of my driver. This is a fairly common thing because the setup with the driver is different, right? We put the ball position more forward. When the ball position is more forward, your club path is going to tend to want to work more to the left. So we actually need to shallow out the club and swing a little bit more from the inside with the driver. Let me illustrate this with the hula hoop here, right? So if you imagine, just to make it simple, my iron ball position, let's say that's in the middle of my stance. That's right here. Right? So if I have my club plane kind of coming down like this, it's into out, into out, into out. It turns the corner at the ball. So my club path is very neutral. We could say it's 0 at the ball. Then after the ball, it works back up and to the left. Right? Well, if now my ball position is where my left hand is, right? It's more forward in my stance off of my lead foot, right? And if I have the same exact swing plane, well, now look what happens. Right? My club is working into out, into out, into out. It turns the corner. Now it's working back to the left as it gets to the ball. So if my club path is working to the left and then I have my face pointing at the target, well, now my face is open to the path of my club, and that's going to create a slice, right? So what I actually need to do is I need to shallow out that club a little bit more. So now my club path is working into out, into out, into out, into out, turns the corner at the ball with a square face, and then works back up to the left afterwards. So there's a couple things that you can do to make this a little bit easier. So one, you can move, if you have the ball position too far forward, if you're playing it really far forward, you might find some relief if you play it just a little bit more back. I'm not saying, maybe move it a ball back, see what that does. Maybe move it another ball back, see what that does, right? It's going to make it easier for you to swing that club from the inside. Because if you imagine if you had with your driver, imagine you had your ball position in front of your lead foot. Like if you're looking from this angle, imagine your ball position was like way out here, right? You can imagine how difficult it would be to attack that ball from the inside. So the more forward the ball is in your stance, the more difficult it is to shallow out the club and get that club to work from the inside because of where the ball is. So moving that ball position, not so far forward in your stance can make it easier for you to get that club to work from the inside. Now, there are downsides to this, right? You're not going to hit you're not going to be able to hit as up on the ball. But if you're coming over the top and swinging, coming down steep, in an effort to hit that ball position more forward in the stance, you're not really hitting up on it anyway, right? Because if I'm going like this is a downward movement into the ball, right? I need to be coming in more like this, more from the inside, hit up on it, right? So moving that ball position, just try it one ball width at a time and see if that makes it a little bit easier. And then what we want to do is we want to swing that club from the inside. Now, if you're swinging that club from the inside, all right, you're attacking that ball from the inside, but it's still slicing, then that means that the face is just too open. So getting the face more closed will help you to do that. There's a couple ways that you can do that. The first way, and this is the easiest way, is to strengthen the grip, right? So if you normally grip the club like this, with kind of your thumbs going down the top of the shaft, taking your lead hand and putting it to where it's more on top of the shaft, right? So now my palm is more on top of the shaft, and then my trail hand to match that, right? Now I have a stronger grip. Now it's going to be much easier for me to get that club face closed. So strengthening the grip can really, really help you to do that. The other thing is changing the wrist angles, right? So if you look at your swing and you see you got some, cupping that left wrist, that lead wrist, and you're kind of cupping it as you're coming down, this club face is kind of pointing to the sky, or it's pointing up in any amount at this club parallel position in the downswing. That club face is going to be too open. You're going to tend to slice it. So we want to get that club face a little bit more angled down toward the ground. Typically, we want to have kind of a flatter wrist at the top. Some of it depends on your grip. If you have a really strong grip, you can definitely have a little bit of cupping in the wrist. But a neutral grip to a weak grip, we're going to need to have flat to bowed lead wrist at the top to be able to get that club face in a really good position, right? So strengthening the grip is going to make it easier for you to do that, because you don't have to change your wrist angles to get the club face more closed. You're just changing your grip. It's much easier to change a setup thing than it is to change something that's happening later, or during the swing, dynamically in the swing. So those would be my tips. Again, this is very, very, very normal thing to run into. So understand, we got to shallow out the club a little bit more with the driver. We got to swing more from the inside. And if we move that ball position a little bit back to where we're getting the best of both worlds, we're able to hit up on it a little bit, but we're also able to shallow out the club and get it to work from the inside because the ball position is not so far forward. That's the next thing. And then if it's still slicing, then what we want to do is we want to get that club face more closed. We can do that by strengthening the grip and or getting stronger wrist angles, moving that lead wrist more toward bowing. Doesn't necessarily have to be bowed, but moving it more toward bowing. The only time it would really need to be bowed would be if you have a very weak grip, right? So basically where your thumbs are going down the top of the shaft, right? Which if you just kind of, went with a neutral grip, just strengthening a little bit and then getting a flat wrist, you'll be in a good place if you do that. All right, let's keep moving here. So James says, Q, having a hard time not swinging too fast. And when I slow down, I lose too much distance. Advice to get back on track. I mean, well, what's happening? You're saying you're having a hard time swinging too fast. What's the downside to that? What's happening? You're saying that you're losing a ton of distance when you don't swing fast. Well, what's happening when you swing too fast? What's the problem? I mean, you really can't swing too fast, to be honest, right? So what's the actual problem that's happening when you swing too fast? So yeah, let me know what the actual problem is, because there may not actually be a problem. It sounds like it's a problem if you don't swing fast, right? You lose distance, right? We don't want to do that. So what's the actual problem if you swing too fast? All right, let's keep going here. So Greg T says, hi Q, 2 questions. First, is there any club face rotation on a short pitch, say 10 yards? Second, how important is having a flat or bowed wrist at the top of the backswing? All right, so yeah, there's typically going to be a little bit, not a ton. Mainly because you have to have a little bit, and a lot of it depends on, there's lots of ways you can hit a 10-yard pitch, right, or a 10-yard chip. if it's literally like, just kind of like a putting stroke, right? There's not going to be much, if any, right? But if I'm hitting a 10-yard pitch, it's kind of like a flop shot. Well, yeah, I'm gonna have some face. The face is probably gonna rotate open a little bit and then rotate a little bit closer. I'm taking a bigger swing. So generally, the bigger the swing is, the more face rotation there's going to be. But we want to reduce it as much as possible in most cases, right? We don't want to be fanning the club face wide open because that means we just have to get it back, right? So yeah, generally with a shorter shot, you're going to be keeping the club face pretty close to square to the arc, right? What that means is that when I bring this club back, here's my arc, right? When I bring this club back, well, it's open to my target, right? But it's square to my arc, right? And then when I bring it through, it's going to stay square to the arc. That's not technically exactly what's happening, but it's pretty dang close to that. So yeah, if it's a really short kind of swing, it's going to stay relatively square to your arc. For a longer swing, the face is going to tend to get a little bit open as you bring it back, right? Because if it doesn't, right, then your swing just ends up kind of looking like this, right? You got to get the forearms to kind of roll to get the club into a good position at the top. When the forearms roll, that opens up the face, but they're going to roll back to the ball. Excuse me. And then the second question was, how important is having a flat bowed wrist at the top of the backswing? It's important depending on the grip that you have. As I was mentioning, talking about Kiedro's question. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but if you have, basically you want your club face or your wrist angles to match your grip, right? So if you have a weak grip, it's going to be if you want to have a pro caliber impact position, it's pretty important to have a bowed wrist. If you look at all the best players in the world that have weak grips, they all have bowed wrists, every one of them. Every one of them that I look at anyway. So Victor Hovland, John Rahm, Colin Morikawa, these are all players that have weak grips, but they bow their wrist, right? And the reason why that's important is that a weak grip is going to tend to have the face more open. So what we have to do is we have to compensate for that with a bowed wrist. A bowed wrist closes the face. You can see here, if I bow my wrist, you can see how that closes the club face. So if I want to come into impact and have shaft lean, so just one thing we want to understand. If I have the club like this, straight up and down, the face is square, and then I just have my hands more forward, well, look what happens to that club face. See how the club face opens up? So I'll put this on here. So you can see here, square club face, straight up and down shaft. Now if I just push my hands forward, you can see how that face opens. You go from this angle, again, straight up and down shaft, square club face, push my hands forward, the face is open, right? So what you have to do to get that club face square, right? So let's say I have a weak grip, and then I push the hands forward, and then I bow my wrist. Well, now look, my hands are forward and I have a square club face, right? So you don't have to have a flat or bowed wrist to hit the ball straight. But to get shaft lean like a pro, if you have a weak grip, then you need to have a bowed wrist to be able to get that club to square up when you have the hands in front. If you have a neutral grip, you're going to tend to have more flat wrist angles, right? There may be some bowing throughout the swing, but generally, so a lot of times in the downswing, about halfway down, you'll see some bowing in the wrist a little bit, but then as they come into impact, they'll tend to square it up. Not all players are doing that, but a lot of them are. So these would be players like Adam Scott, Tiger Woods. These are players that have more neutral grips, and they have flat wrist angles. If you look at the top of the swing, it's flat. I tend to have flat wrist angles, and I have a neutral grip. Now, if you have a strong grip, a really strong grip, you can actually afford to have some cupping in the wrist, right? Because if you were, let's say you had a very strong grip. Let's say you had a grip that's really strong where your lead hand's more on top, right? If you were to go up to the top and then have a bowed wrist on top of that, well, look what happens when I come down. That club face is so shut. it'd be very, very difficult. Even if I got my hands really ahead, look how close that face is, right? So, with a strong grip, I can actually afford to have some cupping in my wrist to have the club face more square. So that's why we generally, because most people struggle with an open face. This is why we generally recommend a stronger, at least a neutral grip, because it's going to make it easier for you to square up the face and have the hands more in front and be able to get that nice draw, ball flight, and also have the hands in front to compress it better. If we have a weaker grip, we're going to tend to early release the club to try to square it up. We're going to tend to kind of swing to the left to try to get the club face to point more toward the target, because swinging to the left is a way to get the club face more pointed toward the target, right? If the face is open, right? Because if I have my face open and I swing out to the right, well, I'm just getting everything a mile to the right. So if I have my face open and I swing to the left, well, now my club face is pointing more toward the target, right? But the problem is that if I swing to the left with the club face pointing toward the target, that's going to be a slice, right? So if I want to hit the ball straight, I want to have my club face, I want to have my club path toward the target, and I want to have my club face toward the target. If I want to hit a draw, I need to have my club face or my club path being to the right of the target with my club face a little bit close to that path to get it to draw, right? So that's really what it comes down to. There are players that have stronger grips, so like Brendan Steele, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Rory McIlroy has a little bit of a stronger grip. He has a little bit of cup in that wrist at the top, right? So you can definitely have cup wrists in the swing. It's just a matter of you have to have a stronger grip to accommodate that. So, just answering the question by itself, in most situations, it's somewhat important because it depends on your grip. So here's what I really recommend doing. Use the grip that most closely matches the wrist angles that you do naturally. It's much easier to adjust your grip for most people than it is to adjust the wrist angles during the swing. Because one is just setting up a different way, and another is dynamically changing what you're doing in the golf swing with your wrist angles. And that can be difficult to do for a lot of people, especially if you don't have like flexible wrists and things like that. So, and most people don't. There's a big reason why a lot of people struggle with bowing the wrist and the reason is that you can't put as much force into the handle when you bow your wrist, right? So if you were to make a fist and clinch that fist as hard as you possibly can, when you're doing that, naturally, you have your wrist in a pretty neutral position, flat to even slightly cupped, right? So my wrist, if I do that, you can see how it's pretty flat, right? So now if I try to maintain that pressure in my fist and I bow my wrist, it's very uncomfortable. It's hard to do, right? And a lot of the power that you have or the speed that you have in the golf swing is directly related to how much force you can put into the handle. Because if you can't put a lot of force into the handle, you can't swing this club fast. Otherwise, it's going to come out of your hands, right? It's the reason why we have grips on the clubs, right? If imagine that this was just bare steel here and I rub Vaseline all over it or something, right? That club, there's no way I'm going to be able to swing that club fast because I can't hold on to it, right? So we got this grip on there and we have the force from our hand going into it that holds onto it, because when you swing this club, there's a force going out, through the shaft that's trying to pull the club out of your hands. So if we don't have a good grip on there, right, then it's going to come out of our hands. So we need to have, some grip pressure to be able to hold on to it, have that speed. So if we're bowing, if we're really stuck on this and we really love our weak grip and I want to have a pro-like impact position, you're likely going to lose some speed because you're bowing your wrist and you're not able to put as much force in the handle. So that's why I recommend if you have a cupped wrist, I'd recommend using a strong grip. If your wrist is very cupped, typically when the wrist is very cupped, it's usually because we're really flaring the right elbow or something like that. That's pushing on the wrist, really cupping it. Typically, I don't see the club in a great position at the top with a cup in the wrist. It happens sometimes, but not always. But let's say you are in that position where, let's say you're the person that really flares out the elbow and cups the wrist, then doing a ball between the elbows drill. So I got my ball here. Here's a little toy ball. I got this at Target for a few bucks. It's just I got from the toy section. take this, you put it between your elbows. That'll keep you from flaring the elbows, and just do lots of reps, keeping that ball between your elbows. Because if I flare my elbow, right, now I can still do this. So you still have to look at it on video, but from there, it's just about keeping that right wrist bent back. Because it's not always the elbow flaring out. Sometimes it's the elbow flaring out and the right wrist doing this at the top. So, there's that too. So having that nice position at the top with the trail arm is important to have that club in a good position. So, yeah, if that's something you struggle with, then yeah. Now, if you have a flat wrist at the top, generally you're going to be better off having a more neutral grip, neutral to strong grip. If you're someone who bows the wrist naturally, something I don't know if I've ever seen anyone who bows the wrist naturally. Pretty much anyone I've ever known that bows the wrist in their swing is something that they worked on in their swing, or they implemented in their swing. It wasn't something that they just did intuitively. But if you are someone who does that, now if you're someone that can do it and it's easy for you to do, then by all means do it. Bowing the wrist, I'm not saying bowing the wrist is a bad thing to do. I'm just saying it's a very difficult thing for most people to do, and most people aren't willing to take the time to train things and change the swing and things like that. It's like, I would love to have a six-pack, right? I would love to have six-pack abs, but I'm not willing to do what is necessary to get a six-pack abs. I'm not saying that six-pack abs are a bad thing. I'm just saying I'm not willing to do what's necessary to get it, right? So it's kind of like some people want to have a pro-like impact position, but they want to have the bowing of the wrist and things like that. Well, that's kind of like having six-pack abs. Are you willing to do the training that it takes to be able to have a bowed wrist and all that things? And most people just aren't willing to do that. There's an easier way. The easier way is to have a stronger grip and using the wrist angles that more match, or to use the grip that most matches your wrist angles. All right. So that's why I mentioned that. But hey, if bowing the wrist is something that comes natural to you, it's very easy for you to do, no problem, doesn't slow you down or anything like that, it's a great thing to do. And that's why you see a lot of pro players do it, because you're getting two things out of it, right? One, you're getting the face more closed, and two, you're getting the club more shallow. When you bow the wrist, it shallows out the club and it closes the face at the same time. You're kind of getting a 2-for-1 special there, which is a great thing, but it's a very difficult thing for a lot of people to do. So that's what I would say. If you have a weak grip and you want to have a pro-like impact position, try the bowing of the wrist. If it's very uncomfortable for you and you don't really want to do all the training and work that's necessary to train that and get that in the swing, then you don't need to do that. You can just strengthen the grip and use the wrist angles, or use the grip that most closely matches what your wrist angles do naturally, right? So that's what I would recommend. All right, let's keep going. So James says, Q, this is James about swinging too fast. I don't mean I have optimal swing speed. I mean my tempo is too fast. Results is topping the ball or losing rhythm or tempo when I rush the swing. Overall, poor shots, seeking thoughts on keeping good tempo and rhythm. Thanks. So what I'd recommend doing is at the top of the swing, that's typically where the problem starts, right? So I would just try to feel like you're letting the club load. Be patient at the top of the swing. That's typically when I see people that are too quick, and I have a tendency to do this as well, get too quick, is you got to have patience at the top of the swing. So bring the club back, and then I would almost feel like you're in slow motion at the top, and then you're preparing to get that fast speed at the bottom, right? So, there's some drills you can do where you kind of pause at the top. So you can make some swings where you go up to the top, you pause, then you make a downswing, and then I would just gradually work toward getting rid of that pause. I think that's a great way to help you to get that rhythm and tempo. Because like I said, the top of the swing, that's typically the tipping point. I'd also make sure that you have a full shoulder turn. A lot of times when I see people that are very quick with the swing, and this is something that I do as well, is I shorten my swing, my shoulder turn gets a little bit shorter, and that makes me start to swing quick. So we want to make sure that we get a nice full shoulder turn. We're nice and patient at the top. And then from there, if we're nice and patient at the top, you think about it. From this position here, this is a very powerful position. Even if I'm not even if I'm not fluid to this point, meaning I'm in a pause position here, I feel like, if I'm addressing this ball right here, and I go up to the top and pause, I'm nice and wound up, I still feel like I can absolutely crush that ball, right? So be patient at the top of the swing. Make sure that you're getting a good full shoulder turn, and it should help you out quite a bit with getting in that good place. All right, so Mark says, hi, Q. I use a Ping 427 driver. Can you explain the difference in degrees of loft and how each position, example, 10.5 degrees, impacts the ball flight, and how would I know what loft is best for me? Also, is it important to see a pro club fitter to see what type of driver works best for my swing? So let's talk about the lofts. Basically, what the loft is going to do is it's going to enable you, if you have a higher loft, it's going to be a higher launch and a higher spin, typically. Lower loft is going to be lower launch and lower spin. So to know what loft you need, you really just have to get professionally fitted. There's no way to really know without getting on a launch monitor and seeing the numbers, because it's not just the loft of the club, it's the shaft, it's the weighting of everything, it's the length of the club. There's a lot that goes into it. So it's not just the loft of the club that may need to change. There may be a combination of things to optimize you. So if you truly want to know what club works best for you, you just have to get professionally fitted to know for sure. Otherwise, you're just kind of guessing. But yeah. But the other thing to consider is you're not likely going to see a huge, because the lofts on drivers are adjustable, but they're usually adjustable in like a 3-degree window. So if you're going from like 9 degrees to 10.5 degrees, you might see a small difference, because it's just not a huge difference. It's 1.5 degrees, right? It's just not a huge difference. So you might see a small difference. You may not notice a difference at all. So something to keep in mind as well. All right, keep the questions coming. So Mark says, also, I hit most of my clubs, including fairway wedges, pretty well, but struggle with pushing and pulling my drives. Any suggestions? Hard to say without seeing your swing, but I would recommend working through the 20-minute shallowing fix with the driver, because it sounds like you're probably coming down steep. And when you come down steep, it makes it harder to control. So work through that 20-minute shallowing fix with the driver, and it should get you to where you're getting that more dialed in. To get to the 20-minute shallowing fix, you can click the instruction tab at the top of the screen, and then you can click the 20-minute shallowing fix from the drop down there. All right, so Ralph N says, working on 20-minute posture fix, short club drill works great. Demonstrate best posture drill for driver or long irons. It's really the same. It's the same. All the choking up on the club does is it helps you to feel that you need to be closer to the ground, right? You need to be closer to the ground. Now, you're not going to be as close to the ground with a driver because it's a longer club, but most people that are coming up out of their posture, a lot of times they're kind of standing straight up as they come into contact. Whether it's the driver, they're either like this, it's a longer club, so it's out there, or it's a wedge and they're like this, right? It's the same thing. So it's no different no matter what club you're using. You want to stay in your posture. It's just that your posture may be a little bit different because the club is different. All right, let's keep going here. So Mark says, I feel like when I have a clear focused target on my drives, it usually goes long and straight. When I don't really see my target is when I seem to pull or push. Well, there you go. I mean, I would make sure you have a target to go at. Can you suggest ways to get focused on my tee shots? It's like when I'm not committed to shot that it goes shot it goes anywhere. So yeah, I would just pick targets, right? Shoot at targets. Look at a target, get behind the ball, visualize what you want to have happen, make a practice swing. So let's say, and choose small targets, right? The fairway is not a target, right? Choose the tip of a tree or the trunk of a tree in the background, or maybe there's houses on the course. So you can choose a chimney or something like that. Choose a target, right? And then get behind it, visualize the ball flight that you want. So if you want to, let's say you just want a dead straight drive, right? I'm visualizing a dead straight. I'm visualizing the height. I'm visualizing the distance that it goes, where it's going to land, all that stuff, where it's going to roll out to. I'm visualizing all that in my mind. And then I'm going to make a practice swing that feels like a straight swing, right? I'm just going to swing this club and feel like the arc coming around where my club path is neutral and my club face is square at impact. Doesn't mean necessarily is. I'm just trying to feel these things. And then I'm going to step up to the ball, right? And again, I'm still visualizing the shot. And then I'm going to make the swing that matches my visual. So that's how I would go about it. Choose a target every single time. If you're just getting over the ball and you have no target to hit to, you're just swinging. Well, yeah, you're probably going to hit it in a wide dispersion, right? But if you have a small target that you're hitting to and you're fixed on that target and you visualize that target, you've made practice swings that would get you to hit that target, you're going to be more likely to hit that target. Now, it doesn't mean that if you go through that process, you're never going to pull or push a shot, because nobody's perfect. Even the best players in the world hit drives that are wayward, right? But you're going to be much more successful if you do. All right, keep the questions coming. About 30 minutes left here. Mark says, do you know if you have any spots left available at the Orlando 2-day clinic? I honestly don't know. Let me see here. I don't know if I can check this anymore. It's showing no spots available for the clinic. So, but we're going to have plenty more clinics. So, just be on the lookout in your email. There might be a waiting list. So, maybe jump on the waiting list. I would look at the email that we sent for the clinics. I wasn't aware that we sent out any emails yet, but if you received an email for the clinic, check on there to see, click the link to see if there's spots available. And then if there aren't, there might be a link there to join a waiting list. And then if there is, okay, thanks. I just saw something this morning. Yeah. So I don't know what I just checked saying that there's no spots. We may not be using that anymore. So that may not be accurate. So go look at the email, and that's what we'll tell you. But yeah, I'm not really sure if we are or not. I know that we just set some dates and stuff because I had to confirm that I was available for said dates, but yeah, I don't know when we start selling them or anything like that. So. So Mark says, is the clinic mostly for the driver distance? Yes, it's only for driver distance. That's all we're focused on at the clinics is driver distance. So it's only for basically increasing your club head speed. If you want a sneak peek of what the clinic is like, go check out the 20-minute distance fix. That's basically what the clinic is. It's basically an in-person 20-minute distance fix is essentially what it is. No problem, Mark. Glad to help. All right, we got about 20 minutes left. If anybody has any more questions, if not, no worries. If you're just hopping on the office hours, I'm just waiting for another question to be asked. I'm going to jump off here right at 4 o'clock. So we got about 15 minutes left. So if we have any more questions, feel free to ask. If not, no worries, no big deal. All right, we got a little less than 10 minutes left. If we have any more questions, if not, no worries. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all next time.